Hey, welcome back to the Ping Pong Flix Show. My name is Chris Wong. This is episode 417 of the Ping Pong Flix Show. Let's go through a few DC updates. The first one is that Tina Gould is saying that she is headed back to the studio to record more of Wonder Woman 2. This is what she said. Good morning and happy Saturday. Headed to the studio to record cellos for the soundtrack of Wonder Woman 2 today and tomorrow. So that movie seems to be shaping up very well in terms of Wonder Woman 1984. And it's great to know, great to hear that we're going to have more of Tina Gould's fantastic work for Wonder Woman's theme. And I can't wait to hear what other renditions, the usage of such music within the new Wonder Woman 1984. It always had that heroic moments for me when Wonder Woman saved Batman, when Wonder Woman decided to save the soldiers, when she was in the field, went to war with the soldiers, and it was just such a impactful moments, especially with Tina Gould's music coming in, and it just gets your heart racing. And I think it's wonderful to see that Hans Zimmer is also involved as well, and they're working together to build much more epic, what will probably be an epic soundtrack for Wonder Woman 1984, and that's something I can be totally up for. Speaking of music, James Gunn posted something today, and it's really just a simple video on Instagram where it's a very important screen test with my pal Georgie Girl the Pomeranian on the set of the Suicide Squad. P.S. Georgie told me she loves me much more than Tom Holland. 2013, sorry Tom. So I guess that's his dog on the set of the Suicide Squad. But what besides the cute little dog and sticking his tongue out, besides that, I noticed the usage of music within this very small clip. And it does have that funky music to it, right? It's like this. So it's very funky, and and almost retro-y, I guess you could say that, but more funk, more 80s. And I'm wondering, is this the type of music that is going to be in the Suicide Squad? Is he trying to capture that for this movie here, that funkiness to it, which is actually along more the lines of more like more along lines of Guardians of the Galaxy than rather being its own, but it could have that moments as well, especially how comic book retro his characters seem to look like. He could capture that time where those comics came out, that music as well. So I'm really trying to visualize this movie, and all I can see is that just these funky cops, it's like it's those type of funky TV shows, those 80 TV shows, and and that's what I'm visualizing at the moment. I could be wrong. He's just throwing in some random music for his Pomeranian, and it has nothing to do with the movie, but I feel like he's trying to give us little hints, the bits and pieces of his idea as he's getting in tune, if you will, of how this movie is going to be portrayed, and it's going to be that type of tone to it. And I'm going to have to see how that really works out. It could actually come across very stylistic, and if he does come across very stylistic and not very standard, then I think that could be a really cool thing, a really good thing, and actually would differentiate itself away from other movies as well. It seems like every director is setting their own tone, they're setting their own type of environment and atmosphere, whether it be music or visuals, with each movie. And that should be pretty exciting for people who want a variety of different types of DC films. So very curious to see what James Gunn is going to do with the Suicide Squad. Next is probably the biggest news today, and probably one you really want to hear about, is that Catwoman has finally been cast in the Batman. This is coming from the Hollywood Reporter. Zoe Kravitz is to star as Catwoman in the Batman. The actress tested last week opposite Robert Pattinson. Matt Reeves and Warner Bros. Upcoming The Batman has found its Catwoman. Zoe Kravitz has nabbed the role of one of the highest profile members of the Cape Crusaders Rogue Gallery, according to several sources. The decision came down over the weekend after a rigorous testing process that saw Ana de Armas, if I can say that right correctly, Ella Balinska, Isa Gonzalez, and Kravitz read with Robert Pattinson, who is set to play the Dark Knight. The testing process occurred over the first week of the month, and the 4 were then narrowed to 2 late last week. Reeves is directing what is described as a grounded take with a large rogues gallery as the antagonists. Jeffrey Wright is already on board as Batman ally Commissioner Jim Gordon. So, from all this, Zoe Kravitz has been found. It's even confirmed by Matt Reeves as he's tweeted out this little GIF of her. Even her dad, her stepdad, Jason Momoa, also acknowledged that she is new Catwoman, amongst of other family members as well. So that is now set in stone. Zoe Kravitz is going to play Catwoman. What's interesting is that we've heard reports and news, and I've even talked about it, that Matt Reeves was intentionally looking for a Zoe Kravitz type for his Catwoman, which is interesting because he eventually just got Zoe Kravitz. Now, I think it was the scheduling conflicts, and maybe she couldn't have gone into it, and even Zazie Beetz could have gone into it, things like that. But if it seems like Matt Reeves got his way, and he finally found the perfect Catwoman he wanted, the one he wrote to be more like Zoe Kravitz than any other actress out there. And so it seems like he's pretty happy with what he got with these characters, Robert Pattinson, Jeffrey Wright, and now Zoe Kravitz. Now we have to see who else is on the table, right? Who's Jonah Hill gonna play? Is Jonah Hill finally gonna be like a Penguin or the Riddler? You know, who else is in this movie? Who's going to be cast as any of these other villains? That's the exciting part. But to me, still the most exciting part about the Batman in terms of casting and what roles they're gonna play is the costume. That's what's going to excite me the most. It's great to see you can finally visualize and see who's going to be in these roles, but the one that we can't really visualize right now is the costume, because it could go either way. It could be any type. I mean, it could go full armor, it could go full cloth, it could go more like Michael Wilkinson's designs. You never know what it's going to go, and that to me is the most exciting aspect of a new portrayal of certain DC characters, because it's always the costume for me. It's always the suit, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Matt Reeves does with that. So it's coming along very well, and visually, this movie is probably going to be pretty fantastic, right? We already got the Rogue One cinematographer involved in this. Now it looks like the Academy Award-winning VFX supervisor Dan Lemon has joined Matt Reeves the Batman. According to Films to Films, Dan is known for his work as a visual effects supervisor on The Jungle Book, the Planet of the Apes trilogy, so that makes a lot of sense because this is a Matt Reeves film, King Kong, Avatar, Man of Steel, iRobot, Lord of the Rings, and Jumper. But for most part, these are fantastic, visually fantastic VFX films on there, and so I'm really happy for that he's going to be involved in this movie, which makes me wonder, seeing these movies that I've just listed out here, big budget, lots of VFX, fantastic VFX at that, but lots of VFX. it makes you wonder, how big is this movie really? What it seemed like a very low budget, low budget, low key, a detective story. It seems like it may be a lot more to that, maybe, or they're really just going to hone in on making Gotham look visually interesting. But VFX is different. There's a lot of different elements to VFX in terms of, it could be lighting, or it could be just atmospheric effects and stuff like that. But it's certainly interesting what he's going to utilize Dan for the Batman. And I'm very curious to how big this movie is actually going to be. Just like James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, where he said this is actually probably one of his biggest films, on top of Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. That also gets me interested to see how big this movie is supposed to be. Well, we initially thought that these were going to be a lower budget, smaller story, not too much in it, not too much effects in it, not too much CGI. It's starting to turn into something else altogether. It's starting to turn into possible a bigger blockbusters, but maybe a lower budget, but a bigger blockbuster type films than smaller films that we've seen before. It's probably going to look a lot better than what Shazam has put out, which is a pretty good movie. But the effects, you can tell the visual effects on there are not up to par with other DC properties during the Snyderverse. So not even up to par with Aquaman, I don't think. So I'm very eager to see what they're gonna do with the VFX and how this Batman is going to look. Next, this is finishing up this video for today. I want to just update you a little bit about Sean O'Connell. He's the managing director for Cinema Blend, where he hinted about the Snyder Cut as of late, that he has gone down to the set of Army of the Dead, talked to Zack Snyder, and I also even kind of cued into how him and Paul Shirey seems to be a little bit more optimistic, I think, or even more excited for the Snyder Cut than ever before. And so he was being asked a lot from fans today in terms of the Snyder Cut, and he does reveal that he cannot talk about it, right? He's under embargo. He's actually, in fact, under embargo for the whole thing. He can't talk about anything about what discussed on the set that day. And he goes back and forth with the fans today, but here's some tweets that he put out. He says, guys, very important distinction. I did not say embargo on the Snyder Cut. There is an embargo on everything that Zack discussed that day. Everything. Don't take some words and run with them because the translation may not be correct. Calm down. Hashtag release the Snyder Cut. But when asked, they just want to know why he said that he wasn't under embargo but now he's saying he cannot talk about the Snyder Cut. What's up with that? He replied, gotcha. I can talk about the idea of the Snyder Cut all day long. I cannot talk about anything I learned about the Snyder Cut on the set of Army of the Dead. That info specifically is under embargo. Sorry, that makes sense. Sorry for the confusion, for real. I totally get what you mean, and I can talk about the SC in general, just nothing that I learned from Zack that day. And then what I really thought was very interesting up to that point is what he actually said here. And it gets me excited, right? He says that he cannot talk about the Zack Snyder. He unfortunately cannot share any of that yet. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, it's under embargo, so what's the big deal with that? What I I believe he can't talk about anything that day, but I would also believe that Army of the Dead, the info for Army of the Dead and the info for the Snyder Cut are two different things, right? It's not something that you can't talk about the Snyder Cut, which has nothing to do with Army of the Dead and vice versa. Now, I understand Army of the Dead, he can't reveal anything until closer to the movie's release, which is expected for winter of 2020, but that doesn't mean that something will happen, maybe, possibly, in terms of the Snyder Cut. That's why he says yet, because what would be stopping him from talking about the Snyder Cut for a 2-year-old, almost a 2-year-old movie that is never going to get released, or in fact never existed? Just the fact that he cannot talk about something that never existed or never going to be released is quite fishy to me, and makes me want to believe that it's going to be released, and of course it exists. So that part I found really interesting, and it does seem that Sean O'Connell was very optimistic about the Snyder Cut, and that gets me excited, to say, not to say the least. But I am also happy and excited to learn more about Army of the Dead as well. But of course, all you are here, you are wondering about the Snyder Cut, and it seems like we're going into a certainly, I believe, a positive direction. Even though people will feel like they want to trust bloggers and journalists, but they're not all bad. And certainly Paul Shirey and Sean O'Connell have kind of come to terms with the Snyder Cut, and I want to know why. So there is that. I am overly optimistic about this. I believe they've learned something about the Snyder Cut, and I believe they feel that it may actually be released soon, maybe. Who knows? All right, guys. Well, that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.